Hello, I'm going to talk about Garcia Marquez's The Handsomest Drowned Man in the World, and I'm going to try to keep it to a few minutes. The noise you might hear in the background is Jameson playing Minecraft.
Sorry if I interrupt you, like I just did.
He just apologized for interrupting us. Okay, in advance. Good. I'm going to walk through the story and point out things that I think are particularly interesting or relevant, and that will be good examples later in the term when we're talking about more theoretical issues. This is going to be weird for me because I don't have a hard copy of the text, so I'm going to be looking on my screen at the PDF and down at my notes while I'm talking to you, and we're just going to go with it. So first of all, let me move the PDF to the front. One thing to notice is that this is one of Garcia Marquez's tales for children. I don't really know what to make of that. If you have a guess, that would be great. But he has several of them, and they're all really weird. And they're all marvelous. Garcia Marquez is at the forefront of magical realism, which is this kind of writing where you write about things that are magical, but that everyone else seems to think of as reasonable or true. So this is an example of magical realism. And on the first page, I want to pay attention primarily, and this goes through the whole story, but primarily the fact that dead man seems to become a category, like he's the handsomest dead man, as if there were other dead men to compare him to, which maybe there are because other people drown, surely. But then later when he becomes the tallest dead man or the handsomest dead man who was this tall, it seems like he's an example of a drowned man who's unusual. And he's unusual in many ways. He's really tall and really big, but he's also, they have to de-scale him. But he's also unusual in the sense that he is, that they, first of all, realize he's a stranger, but then they have these strong reactions to him. And when I say they, I mean in the story, it's first the women respond in this particular way. And then we have this one nod to this one woman who says he's called Esteban, and then some of the younger women. But mostly it's the women. And then we get the men responding in this other way. And the categories of men and women seem pretty firm here. And they're used as a sort of shorthand for how the people in the town, in the village, are responding. Particularly interesting to me is that the women start to compare him to their own men, and they're like, yeah, our men aren't as good as Esteban is. They're small and they probably couldn't do the things Esteban could do. And there's definitely a sexual overtone here. I'm hoping Jameson's not paying attention. We'll have to work that out in future mini lectures. And then when it turns out, when he shows up, he's a stranger, and then it turns out that he's not from any of the neighboring villages, and then he belongs to them. They say he's ours. And that means that they get to keep him. So here's, not just that they get to keep him, but that he's sort of become one of them. So here's the thing that's most interesting to me about the story. And it comes down to the fact that the woman looks at him and says, he has the face of someone who's called Esteban. Esteban is on the one hand, a name she just made up, but then everyone looks at him and says, oh yeah, he's called Esteban. And then even the men come back and they're like, oh yeah, he's called Esteban. And it's weird to say that someone's clearly Esteban. It would be like looking at a woman and saying, well, her name is Julie, of course. Which isn't to say that 1 out of 100,000 times you might be right, but here it seems like they're reading his body. And what they read on his face is that he's called Esteban. And then they think of all of the ways he must have been really polite and really charming and really self-deprecating. And then all of the ways in which he must have been ashamed or uncomfortable. And all of that they're putting on him. And what I'm trying to sort of wrap my head around is the way that they're both reading him, like saying, well, I can tell by looking at him that he's called Esteban and his personality is this way, and writing on him by saying, we will write Esteban on his face, or we will put these characteristics on his personality the same way they dress him, for example. The similarity between reading something and writing it or writing on it is almost a difference of where you stand in terms of interpretation. And here, their interpretation of Esteban is the same thing as the stuff they're making up about Esteban, and I'm saying writing on him. So that's the main moment for me, when they decide he's called Esteban, and then everyone is like, well, clearly he is called Esteban. I don't know why we didn't all see that first. They then decide that there's only one Esteban in the world, and this is he, and they're very lucky, and then their whole world changes. They decide that their village is going to be good enough for Esteban, and everything's going to be bigger. And I'm not sure why that is, why they decide that their village needs to be worthy of Esteban. I guess, except, and this is, I'm unclear on this also, that they decide they're Esteban's village. Why are they Esteban's village when they end up burying him? He clearly had a huge influence on them, but it's not as clear to me why they read him and they write him, and then they decide that their village is about him, but then somehow also not worthy of him. And that might be a question to start off with, although I hope you had many others, and it's a fascinating piece. I hope you like it as much as I do. And I also really hope that this works. Okay.